for inviting me. It's a pleasure to come back to Croatia, both because this is my country of origin and because of the graciousness of hosts. And this will be a slightly different talk. I am a physiologist, an exercise physiologist, and so I try to use exercise to unravel the mechanisms of energy regulation. So I will tell you, this is what I will tell you during the talk. First of all, most of you, many developed nations have the problem of weight gain and obesity. And people try to lose weight. And unfortunately, dieting alone is not a very good way of accomplishing the goal. So I will show that evidence. And then it is possible to maintain lower weight after dieting, but it requires a combination of exercise as well as food restraint. And there is a registry on the web called the National Weight Control Registry in the United States, which documents people who have been successful to maintain significant weight loss over a longer period of time. But what I would like to talk about is whether exercise and how exercise may be helping people lose weight. And so this ties in with the way it is understood that energy regulation is accomplished. I believe that the prevailing view of energy regulation, which was mostly developed through rodent work, is not supported by facts. And I think that exercise is helping us develop a slightly different view. So I will try to talk about a hormonal mechanism that may be involved, not in the way that traditional energy regulation mechanism posits, but in a slightly different way. So here's the problem. This shows you that since 1970s, there has been really a huge increase in weight gain. And in the United States in particular, I'm very embarrassed with them, so I'm going to turn it around. In the United States, we are unfortunately leading the charge. So here's the rate of weight gain in the United States. Japan is doing a great job. People there, a very small percentage of people are overweight and obese, and there's no huge rise in obesity. And then the European countries fall in between, and in general, most developed countries are having a problem with weight gain. And that, of course, then is associated with all kinds of morbidities, metabolic syndrome, diabetes, coronary heart disease, and so on. So it's a major health problem. So here is evidence that it's an old study, but it basically shows that when people just diet, you decide to lose weight, and you go on a crash diet of sorts, you lose weight. Everybody can do that, basically. But the trouble is that over years, so here's a span of about 4 years, people tend to regain it. There seems to be slight difference between men and women. See, men do slightly different pattern of regain. They do regain. The greatest regain occurs very early on, during the first year, and then it starts tapering off. And women are much more dogged in recapturing their lost weight. That may have biological reasons, childbearing and so on. Now, this is a meta-analysis, a combination of a great number of studies, statistical analysis of the results. And the points I would like to show you that, oops, I'm again clicking wrong things, that exercise alone, which is the yellow, that's usually endurance exercise, walking, jogging, running, and so on. It really does not produce a substantial weight loss unless people also diet. Usually it's between 1% and 3%. If you do a crash diet, that is a 500, 600 calorie diet, which is sometimes done, people will lose huge amounts of weight, but then will regain very rapidly. The green line is exercise and diet. So that exercise has been phenomenologically proven to help people resist weight regain. The question is, how does that happen? And I'm not going to give you definitive answers, but I will give some suggestions. So I would like to say that science, physiology, is basically, I think, incorrectly explaining how our weight is regulated. It's based on the following, basically on this following relationship, which is the relationship between the hormone leptin released by the adipose tissue. So the basal concentration of that hormone, which you see here, is proportional to fatness. And the same is true of basal insulin. So the fatter we are, the higher our basal insulin, the higher our basal leptin. And then with studies with genetic rats, the position has developed that we regulate our weight homeostatically, that there's a negative feedback loop, so that large quantity or large size fat cells produce more leptin, that this leptin enters the brain, and that basically it produces two effects, that it inhibits food intake once we become fat, once we are overweight, and that it increases energy expenditure. That would involve, metabolic rate, thermic effect of food, as well as movement, exercise, voluntary, spontaneous activity. So I would like to say that the evidence doesn't support this. So if you look at the first fact, after leptin gene was cloned and people became very interested in leptin and energy regulation, a very large trial was done by Dr. Hemsfield. And here he used a population of obese people, and he either gave them placebo, which are these rectangles, or he gave them physiological quantities of leptin, which would be 0.1 milligram per kilogram, or he gave them 3 times that would be triangles, I believe. No, I'm sorry, the circles. Or he gave them 10 times normal amount of leptin. Now we're getting beyond physiological. Or he gave them 30 times normal amount of leptin, grossly unphysiological or pharmacological. And basically all of the physiological and slightly supraphysiological ranges did nothing to reduce fatness in humans. So that the hypothesis that leptin is there to suppress our weight and appetite when we become obese is not correct. It doesn't seem to be supported by facts. Then the second corollary of the current regulatory hypothesis is that as we get fat and leptin rises, that it increases energy expenditure, inhibits our feeding to reduce weight, and increases energy expenditure. And this is now information on energy expenditure. This is high energy expenditure, this is low energy expenditure, and this is obesity. And so what you see is a beautiful inverse relationship, which is totally opposite from that hypothesis. Not only is high leptin and high obesity not increasing activity, but people who are, let's say, morbidly obese here, they're almost totally inactive. And it's not because they cannot move. It's really a motivational issue. And let me show you why it is a motivational issue. This is an old study, but it is cited a lot because it's really stunning. Here you put rats in a box with a wheel so they can freely run, and most animals will spontaneously do physical activity and run. Except that they were given insufficient amount of food. Only for 2 hours were they allowed to eat, and they couldn't possibly eat enough to maintain their weight. So this curve here is their weight loss. So they would eat as much as they could, but they would lose weight. And this curve shows their running activity. So as they lost some weight, they ran more. They lost more weight, then ran more. They lost more weight, they ran more. So in the end, they were running 300 to 500 times % more than at the start, because or in proportion to their weight loss. So it really shows you that actually the motivation to run, spontaneous running, is totally inversely related to what that hypothesis is claiming. The fatter we get, the more motivated we are to move. And the leaner we get, the more motivated we are to move. So And that's true for anorexics too. People who, for whatever reason, compulsively don't want to eat and lose a lot of weight, they are often very hyperactive. So now, the only prediction of that energy regulatory hypothesis that seems to work is that when leptin declines, it doesn't inhibit feeding, and actually people become hungry. And so this seems to be because declining leptin increases motivation to eat, makes us hungry, and also increases the motivation to be physically active. It is because I'm essentially working in the field that is at the intersection of several sciences. Although I'm an exercise physiologist, I deal with a lot of stuff that psychobiologists or neuroscientists deal with because of my interest in energy regulation. And so psychobiologists are interested in motivation. And they have been looking at brain substrates, parts of the brain where this motivation may reside. Why are animals motivated to seek food, to bar press for food, to self-stimulate their brains and so on. And they found a region of the brain that is sensitive to weight loss. And that's the region shown here. Now, it doesn't show the whole brain, but if you picture the forebrain, at the base of the forebrain, in the middle basal ganglia, and close to the ventral part of that is a nucleus called nucleus accumbens. So it is ventral pallidal area, and here dopamine is released, opiates are released, and so on. And here animals will run more and eat more and seek more food if they are underweight. And they will self-stimulate this area just to stimulate this portion of the brain. So this seems to be the substrate of hunger and motivation to seek food, to locomote. And so the traditional, I'm sorry, again, I'm clicking the wrong thing. The people interested in energy regulation have now modified their view a little bit. They are still clinging to this homeostatic view that if you have more fat, it is going to increase leptin, and the leptin is going to suppress feeding and increase activity. But they are now also pointing an arrow that leptin, high leptin, will suppress the motivation to eat. And that is true. So now, in that substrate that is sensitive to weight loss, if you administer leptin to those animals, they will be less motivated to eat and less motivated to run. But that is only if they are underweight. You see, and the hypothesis here claims that when we become obese, leptin does the job. I've already shown you that it doesn't. With that study where in humans, obese humans, leptin injections do not suppress their obesity. So the story then is we seem to have a mechanism in our body that is very good at defending our weight, our body mass, against losses, but not very good in defending it against weight gain. And so people may say, well, why doesn't leptin suppress feeding when we get overweight or obese? And the parent answer is that we do, unfortunately, have two mechanisms involved in motivating us to eat. One is sensitive to weight loss. That's the one where leptin has a role. And the other one is so-called hedonic. These substrates for hedonic eating are very similarly distributed to the ones responsible for hunger, except that when animals and humans become obese, they become finicky. So that hedonic system rules our intake. Once we become overweight and obese, we like good tasting food, sweet, fat, and so on. And animals and humans refuse to then take bitter food, stale food, food that doesn't taste so good. So we have been designed to eat no matter what, unfortunately. So here I would like to explain a little bit what happens when we try to lose weight. First of all, this is just showing metabolic energy expenditure. This is basal metabolism, this is thermic effect of food, and this would be movement, cost of movement. And when we slowly gain weight, just by making an error of eating 200-300 calories more every day, we basically increase our body mass. Here's somebody who went from 70 kilograms to 85 kilograms. And notice that resting metabolism increases. This is really a demonstration that lean body mass also increases. They don't just become fat. They become slightly bigger people. And they end up with more fat cells. And they also have higher thermic effect of food because larger body mass requires more food in absolute terms. So they do eat more. And that then involves some metabolic expenditure. And also moving a heavier body involves more calories, so that their energy expenditure also increases. So that happens imperceptibly without any defenses, and that's why we see all that rise in obesity nationwide or globe-wide. But then when you try to lose weight, here is now somebody who tried to lose 16 or 15 kilos down to 70 kilos. Adjustments do occur in body mass. It goes down. We saw that before. But what happens is that you have now a very vigorous defense system that kicks in. One is we are hungry, and that's where leptin comes in. Number two, there is also increased efficiency of food storage. Whatever we eat gets stored more efficiently into fat because we are very insulin sensitive, and one of the actions of insulin is fat synthesis, glycogen synthesis, protein synthesis, and so on. In addition, sympathetic nervous system is suppressed in terms of lipolysis, so we don't burn as much fat. And also many hormones, like thyroid hormones, which normally mediate metabolic rate at the mitochondrial level, are suppressed. So I'm showing the same picture basically to underscore the fact that with changes in body mass, we are not just changing fat. There has been a preoccupation with fat in energy regulation, but really it is more than that. And actually, anytime you lose weight, you also lose bone mineral, so that bones like heavier bodies. And conversely, when we gain weight, we gain lean body mass in addition to fatness, as well as some lean body mass. And the reason I'm mentioning that because I would like to reinterpret energy regulation from the perspective of exercise and leptin. So what happens when people lose weight, or when animals lose weight and then they are no longer dieting and are given food ad libitum? People fall off the wagon and start eating again. So this is a very nice study which was done with rats. They first of all made them lose 14% of their body weight. Then they maintained them for quite a few weeks, I think about 8 weeks at that low weight. Except one group was exercised and the other group was just kept food restricted. And then they stopped food restriction. The sedentary group then showed this rather spectacular weight regain. That's the so-called relapse, or getting fat again. But the exercise group showed much lower weight regain. So here is the issue. What's exercise doing that is special, that is helping us keep lower body weight? And this is the same thing, except it's expressed as percent change in body weight. So I would like to show what metabolically happens. So metabolically, when this is showing simply first 30 minutes of giving animals food. You have to feed them sometime, right? So it's still food restriction, but they're given some food. And if they're sedentary, they show this huge increase in carbohydrate metabolism. Carbohydrate metabolism is biochemically stimulated by insulin. Insulin shifts metabolism to carbs. So basically what they are doing is they are eating their meal, and they are showing a big shift or increase in carbohydrate metabolism and suppression of lipid metabolism. So while relaxing or regaining or eating when we are food restricted, our metabolism shifts in favor of insulin secretion and storage of fat and so on, but not if we're exercising. At the bottom you see the same sort of tracking during the first 30 minutes of giving food to animals, except that they are the runner animals. And what you notice is that within 10 minutes of being given food, animals that are running show an increase in fat metabolism. This is expressed as respiratory exchange ratio, and the low ratio means fat lipolysis and fat utilization, and high values mean carb. So the dark line are the sedentary animals, showing this big carbohydrate and insulin secretion, carbohydrate utilization, and the exercisers show, even during this weight maintenance period, increased fat metabolism. Now, the most interesting part is when they are given now unlimited amounts of food, and sedentary animals show, again, it's respiratory exchange ratio. High means carbohydrate metabolism, low means fat metabolism. And now, if you look for a period of hours during free feeding, no restriction on food anymore, animals that are exercising show much higher fat metabolism throughout, both initially when they exercise as well as through the rest of the day. So basically exercise changes metabolic pattern in favor of fat utilization, which then curbs the rate of weight regain. This is true also in humans. In this study they used obese women, and they then had them either exercise or not exercise, and then they looked at the basal lipolytic rate, basal rate of fat metabolism, as well as stimulated rate of fat metabolism, stimulated either by cyclic AMP, which would be part of the signaling pathway in fat utilization. I'm sorry, I'm clicking everything wrong. Boy, I really clicked away. So when they exercise, you notice that they, if they're sedentary, they suppress lipolysis. They metabolize carbs. So when they are exercising, they, in dark bars, they don't show basal suppression of lipolysis. They show increased stimulated or epinephrine stimulated lipolysis is definitely less suppressed than if they are not exercising. So exercise in part restrains weight regain by favoring fat metabolism and by reducing carbohydrate metabolism and insulin action. So the reason I was emphasizing that when we lose body mass, we lose bones, muscle, as well as fat, is that this new line of research, which is very exciting, which sort of exploded in the past 10 years, links leptin to suppression of bone accumulation, bone mass accretion, and as well as action on the fat. So it is spearheaded by Gerard Carcenti, and what he has demonstrated is that leptin, when it's high, when we are gaining weight, tends to inhibit bone formation, and it inhibits it by acting on beta adrenergic receptors on osteoblasts, the cell type inside the bone. Osteoblasts produce a hormone called osteocalcin, and we people normally thought that osteocalcin had, its business was just bone and nothing else. What Karsenty has shown is that osteocalcin affects insulin action, insulin secretion, adiponectin, adipose tissue hormones, that it has profound metabolic events. And so I think that this provides a link. Now, Karsenty is not interested in exercise, unfortunately, so none of his research has anything to do with exercise, but I'm interested in exercise. So I'm trying to piece together a story for you. So what his research has shown is that leptin doesn't necessarily act directly on the brain, as the mouse and rat research has suggested, but that it actually acts through Raphe nuclei. And I'm sorry I'm taking you way into the brain, but that's part of science. So these nuclei in the hindbrain, between pons and medulla oblongata, and they normally secrete, or the neurons produce serotonin, which is an appetite stimulating and weight gain and bone growth stimulating circuit. And leptin inhibits these neurons. So that means it will inhibit appetite through inhibiting serotonin projections that go through arcuate nucleus, and leptin will inhibit serotonin projections of Raphe nuclei going through ventromedial nucleus, and that is the action that blocks bone mass accretion. So now, how does this all come together with exercise? So I have recently done a study where I was interested in whether leptin actually plays a role in, whether leptin first of all detects fluctuations in our energy balance, and whether it may be involved in appetite suppression during exercise. So in this study, I either denied women 400 calories at breakfast time. They either had 100 calorie breakfast or 500 calorie breakfast. And notice how leptin declined if they had a very small breakfast. So leptin knew that they were getting into negative energy balance. Or I gave them a small breakfast, but I infused the missing calories intravenously through total parenteral nutrition. This is what they do in the hospital with people who cannot eat. So they were then in 500 calorie balance, just like the women who ate 500 calories. And notice that the leptin went up. So leptin knew that they were in positive energy balance. So then I did the corresponding experiment with exercise. Here I gave everybody 500 calories, but I had some of them exercise for 2 hours, so they expended, lost 550 calories, burning, metabolizing. And sure enough, leptin knew that calories were missing. And if I did the same, but infused calories back so that they were not in negative energy balance, they again showed higher leptin balance. So leptin was responsive to energy balance. So if we just look at the right side of the picture, you notice now that even though open circle group has lost 550 calories exercising, so they're in negative calorie balance, and the other group received calories intravenously, they both during exercise show negative hunger. They're not hungry. Hunger is suppressed, and many people have shown that exercise suppresses hunger. So now we are tracking both the issues of how leptin acts as well as how exercise acts in helping us maintain lower body weight. So one way that exercise may be doing it is through suppressing appetite, and it's possible that this is because during exercise, both the group that is in negative energy balance and the group that is getting calories intravenously, replacing calories intravenously, show an elevation of leptin. It is not particularly striking, but there is an increased leptin release during exercise. And then an additional way that exercise may help us not regain weight is that we do not seem to respond to calories lost during exercise. This is now a group that has lost 550 calories but has not gotten anything back. And I gave them food for lunch, as much as they wanted, and they ate as much as the people who were sedentary and had a big breakfast to begin with, and actually all groups ate identical amounts. So really we do not sense calories lost through exercise. We do not make them up by eating more at the next meal. And then the final study I would like to show is a study where they have done weight loss, 10% weight loss in humans who are overweight or obese. And then they maintain them for, I think, 8 or 10 weeks at the reduced weight. And what they found when they tested them is that they were hungry and that they were more efficient in storing calories, and they had increased efficiency during exercise. They did not, they used fewer calories to accomplish certain tasks at 10 watts and 25 watts, low intensity exercise. And then they administered leptin to those individuals while they were weight restricted. And the open bars show the changes in biological outcomes after leptin treatment. What basically leptin treatment did, it normalized the thyroid hormone levels, which normally reduce metabolism. It also reduced this suppression of metabolism, both thermic effect of food and non-resting energy expenditure. It made exercise energy expenditure less efficient. In other words, leptin applied during weight restriction seemed to correct some of the problems shown, physiological problems and adaptations, the defense mechanisms shown during weight loss. So I would like to propose that, in contrast to the theory that leptin suppresses hunger and causes weight loss in obesity, which doesn't seem to be supported by facts, instead I'd like to propose that leptin seems to facilitate the recovery of weight only up to our pre-loss weight. Because it is reduced when we lose weight, it keeps suppressing feeding and acts on metabolism as the weight is regained and fat is regained. And therefore, it seems to be acting more as a determinant of our weight set point rather than as a way of suppressing our weight when we push it above our healthy normal weight set point. So when you see that with parallel declines in body fat and plasma leptin, inhibition of hunger drive and sympathetic activation are reduced. Its actions are mediated by its stimulation of sympathetic activation, and it seems to also involve the action on the osteoblasts in the bone. And so when leptin is reduced and body fat is lost, it allows increased feeding, but this progressively declines as our weight is regained up to the set point. And so in my proposal, leptin appears to regulate body mass set point, our original weight set point, by defending it against reductions rather than suppressing increases in body weight and obesity below the weight set point. So, thank you very much. This is